I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, could you do a roll call, please?
Commissioner Webster? Here. Commissioner Holshausen?
Here.
Commissioner Howard?
Here.
Commissioner Garber?
Here.
Commissioner Marks?
Here.
Commissioner Plowman?
Here.
And Chairman Broder.
Here. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda as presented before you.
I'll make that motion as well here.
Support?
I've got a motion with support. A discussion on the agenda. Seeing none, all in favor of approving tonight's agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is approved, and we move right into our agenda items, which is our county commissioner, or county coordinator, interviews. So, I believe Adam Stacy is first.
So we're just going to be standing right here? Is that the... Okay.
That would be absolutely fine.
That might be a while. So I have a PowerPoint, but I thought it'd just be easier just to look through it in the paper.
Before you get started,
Sure.
and then we'll cut in your time, Dr. Boggs, should we, for the commissioners, summarize what the task is so each person doesn't have to go through what their task was and we know what it is that they're talking about?
So the task at hand was to look at the 22 budget and imagine that there was not any ARPA funds to balance it out for this year, and that there's an economic downturn on the horizon that looms, and how are you going to balance the budget between these factors as a scenario.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. So everybody have a copy that's been passed around the room? Okay, great. Oh, who doesn't?
Greg, they're...
You're holding on to it, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, I should have sniped you.
No, I just prefer to, look at your paper and have a conversation. And if you don't have to hold your questions to the end. This is a thought experiment. We are talking about real taxpayer dollars and real positions. So if you have questions, just go ahead and fire away and interrupt me as we go along. So obviously, based on your recommendation, I took a fresh look based on my public service career that spans 4 decades, from the mid-'90s to today. I have not been privy to all the discussions you have had in the past, so I may be reinventing the wheel, so I apologize. And no disrespect to Dr. Boggs or the commissioners who have been here in the past. I know you've had some challenging times a while ago, so I know you've probably gone through a lot of the scenarios I'm going to go through here, but just bear in mind as we go through. So, just want to begin by saying, obviously, Shiawassee County is looking at some short-term headwinds. It's pretty much a consensus. We're going to be heading into a national recession, and as we've seen in the past, when we have national recessions, Michigan tends to get even harder. We had that decade-long recession in the early 2000s that never seemed to relent, and then got hit with the housing crisis on top. Obviously, we mentioned the loss of ARPA funding. The housing balloon, we're hoping this time it's a fizzle, not going to be a pop. I don't think we would be expected to see the same catastrophic levels that we saw in 2008 in the housing market. Historically high inflation, rising interest rates continue in 2023, and like I said, mortgage interest rates, they started at 3% in January. They're over 7% at the end of the year. I mean, who would have seen that coming? I mean, that's the largest increase in 50 years. So looking ahead, obviously the long-term headwinds, and I mentioned this in my previous presentation, Shiawassee has had population challenges. Everybody is aware of that. The population is aging. That's going to put strain on certain services that the county offers as well. There are challenges to the employer base that are within the county borders. You only have one business that employs more than 500 workers. The hospital. Your average commute is 27 minutes. That's a Langsburg to Lansing commute, but obviously that's average. So more people are going from like Byron to Saginaw and other jobs, leaving to try to find their employment. Moving ahead, I just want to talk about the taxable valuations. This was just a rough projection on my mind, having no other information than the fact that inflation is at 5%, not anticipating if there was any new construction or new development going ahead. Obviously, though, Shiawassee got hit tremendously hard from the housing crisis. I mean, it took you guys 10 years to get back your taxable valuations. That was a huge shock, and that's what caused you guys to make a lot of difficult decisions in the past. But obviously, I've seen the reports talking about the solar farm that was established. That's probably why your valuations knocked up. Clearly, the solar farm, though, is more of a sugar rush. The depreciation schedule on those is pretty steep. I know that we've been looking in Lansing for a steadier stream of income from a PILT payment system. It's been debated on and again. I don't see it going anywhere. The utilities have the upper hand right now, and I just don't see us looking for a miracle cure in that end. So looking ahead at the financial forecast, I was just throwing 3 different scenarios on hand, just looking at regular inflationary growth, not looking at sudden new residential development or new business construction. I think the more likely scenario might be something in the middle. I don't think we're going to see a huge housing correction, but there probably is going to be a modest correction because of the inflation home that we saw. We saw a lot of speculation in the housing market. So I would anticipate that we're looking at our property tax collections being relatively flat over the next couple of years. Now, there's going to be a delay in that. We saw in 2008 that we saw a surge in tax evaluations in 2009 before it started dropping off in 2010. So you can definitely expect to see growth in the following year, but at that point, I think you have to look at something that's more even-keeled. So I just want to review, obviously, from the board's perspective, you've instituted a series of reforms recently, so I'm cognizant of that. I know you're aiming for that 15 to 20% sweet spot for your fund balance. I know it got down to, in the single digits, during the tough times and 5 to 6 years after the housing correction. So I know that wasn't something you guys were comfortable with, but you had to do it. You've avoided your delinquent tax revolving fund as a revenue source for 3 straight years. That's good. We should continue that policy to maintain fiscal discipline. Going to 44 North was obviously a wise move because healthcare spending is definitely exposure area, and you got to stay on top of that. And the investment in the rehabilitation of the courthouse, it's an architectural centerpiece of Corunna. I totally understand that. I totally support and approve of that because you have to have some foundation piece in these small communities for downtown development to build around. So moving ahead now that we've kind of got those out of the way, your legacy costs, everyone's aware of the decisions the board made about your legacy costs, but that's obviously, to avoid the catastrophic deficits in the future, it's going to create your short-term pressure. And really the budget deficit I looked at has really been developed by those increase in pension contributions. It's necessary, but that's where the angle is that we have to attack. So looking at your staffing levels, I know that this board, recognized the hardships they've had to put on their own staff, the payroll freezes, the furlough days. I know you did a wage study. I know you went to a 9-step system from a 5-step to try to incentivize people like they're moving up the ladder a little bit. Obviously, though, going forward, I think that that's the major expense that you have is on your staff and healthcare, and the staffing levels are probably not going to be sustainable by the current revenues unless we see something significant turning around. So looking ahead at what the balanced budget proposal that I would submit for this scenario, fiscal 23, which you're kind of looking at me projecting forward in fiscal 24, is if selected by this group, I would spend the first month meeting and greeting important stakeholders, not just department heads and elected officials, but major employers in the area, major influencers in the nonprofit industry. Just to, I can't come in and start looking at a budget in a very in-depth way unless I'm really introducing myself first and making sure that I'm not the enemy. I'm coordinating this team effort to try to solve the challenges before us. At that point, I would request a hiring freeze just so that if I have to make recommendations on the staff level, I don't want to dig a hole deeper than where we start out with by the end of the year. Now, of course, the board has the option on high priority positions to overwrite that freeze in the immediate future. And saying if this is an important position we're going to have to replace, I understand that. But my goal is to have a recommendation to you, by the beginning of June so that we can evaluate and go forward. So after I've had interacting with your department heads and elected officials, I would assume a lot of these people have been here before. They've seen the really tough, challenging times that you guys went through, in the last 10 to 12 years. they're going to have a lot of expertise. They're going to know what's ahead. They understand what's going on. They know how to run their departments, and they can, assist us with trying to find a way of, creating that new model that's sustainable going forward. So I'm going to lean heavily on the human capital that Shiawassee County has built in over the years. That being said, I also want to do a study of similar county operations, looking at what they have done. I have seen, just in my interactions with other counties, I know that they've instituted some interesting reforms using technology. I don't know, in depth what you've done on the technology front, but I do know it's been a savings in some of our departments. For instance, in my own county, we used technology to save on a position or two of clerical in our prosecutor's office, just for all the paperwork being moved around. I know our Register of Deeds operations has been streamlined as well. It's pretty good over in Clinton County. At that point, though, I don't want to neglect all the other information and talent sources we have in Shiawassee County. I definitely want to convene, not just one, but several roundtables of the city and township managers. I'd be happy to talk to the elected officials as well, but from my experience, usually the elected board here would be the primary focus with the other elected officials in the community, and I would be the more interface with the other staff positions, which is why I'd identify talking with the city managers and the township managers to get their perspective on what they need from the county, what they can see reforms at the county level, and what they'd be satisfied with. I just want to emphasize that I really do want to take a deep, hard look at a 10-year capital improvements plan, because I don't want to get surprised by equipment and infrastructure that might fail 6-7 years from now. I want to make sure that this fund balance that you've used the ARPA funds for and have built up is going to last and be available to us to make those expenditures, so we're not caught in any kind of recurring budget situations once we reach a structural balance with our revenues and our expenditures. So moving ahead on the other side, once I reach those conclusions, I would present that new model to you for your review and approval in early June. Obviously, I'm going to need your help. Many of you have made these tough decisions before. You're going to assist me with saying, hey, we've tried that, it didn't work, or we tried to go that way, it may not have been politically feasible. I'm going to rely on you guys to help me avoid some of those landmines so we can find a solution that everybody can get behind. After that point, if the board approves, I would go back to the department heads and elected officials and then negotiate with them over the summer on the vision about how they're going to reallocate their manpower and resources to better fit our model going forward. And like I said, everything, I intend this job to be my last job. I've had 24 years in the legislature, 12 House, Senate. Everything I do from now on is looking at a 10-year horizon. So, 2 or 3 years from now, I'll be looking again at another 10-year horizon. I want to make sure that that 10-year horizon is in focus, because you've made a lot of tough decisions looking on a long-term horizon. I want to make sure we maintain that long-term thinking. Following up, we just obviously have the public hearing and the budget in the fall, and then the approval, and I would be very happy to be the face and spokesperson for this budget. I will take the slings and arrows as the county coordinator, so I totally understand my role in that. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to be able to cut our way or find new revenue sources, even if some of our property tax collections might be a soft projection and maybe it's going to be a little rosier. I'm not going to say we're going to be able to find everything in the current budget to make it happen all at once. So I think we're probably going to have to do some kind of a glide path approach, using some of that fund balance, using some of the, taking advantage of the high interest rate climate. We're obviously going to be generating additional savings on our liquid assets, our delinquent tax revolving fund. The important thing is not to use those fund balances for structural deficits. Those fund balances of 15-20% are supposed to exist if we hit some kind of a housing correction and we can't anticipate we need to fix it. So if we come together and agree on the model for a sustained operation going forward, then I would feel comfortable we can say, okay, we can use this part of the fund balance plus this higher interest rate and this piece of the delinquent tax revolving fund, and we can find a way over maybe a 2-year period of getting down to where we're sustainable. And I think probably realistically that's the way it's going to happen. But as long as we agree on the model, I think it makes your jobs easier to tap into that fund balance at that point, knowing it's really just a short-term fix. Long-term recommendations, these are just some of the ideas I threw out there because, like I said, I'm always going to be looking at a 10-year horizon. Continue to work in collaboration with our regional partners on new business, new residential projects. Like I said, from my experience in Clinton County, everything we did was regionally focused. We kind of lucked our way into some projects like the Glambia Spartan Cheese Factory, just because LEAP was already doing some work and just kind of stumbled on this company looking for an intersection of agriculture and dairy and the highway infrastructure we had there. Personnel costs are probably going to be a constant vigilant approach going forward. Obviously, you know that with using 44 North on your healthcare costs, but human capital is our most important asset, and to retain that asset, it's going to cost money. We're going to have to stay fixed on that. Like I mentioned earlier, there might be available opportunities in technology. I think right now at the state level, there is going to be opportunities with the current political structure. They're probably going to be offering more grants, more block money available. It may not necessarily go to counties, but it may go to cities and large townships. And, if we can help them on that process and coordinate, a rising tide lifts all boats. If we can help get money into Owasso, Corunna, Durand, it's going to help the county operations. Just as a suggestion, and this is long term, I just threw out the idea of, when the current office holders choose to retire, it might be wise to look at combining registered deeds and clerical operations. Other counties have done it. It generally doesn't save a lot of money up front. It didn't for Clinton County when we did it. Over the long haul, though, all of a sudden you're talking real money if you look at a 10-year horizon, which is why, I'm sorry.
15 minutes, so if you finish up the next minute or two,
Yep.
it'll give us time for questions.
So obviously I'd look at the fee structure. I don't know if you've done a recent fee structure. We want to make sure that time, labor, resources are being taken care of. I would just throw out the idea of possibly looking at the operating millage. Just by my calculation, I think over the last 5 years he lost $300,000. I know it's scheduled to reset in 20 years. In my county, we do it about every 4 to 8 years. If it's periodic and renewable, and it looks like there may be a gap in 2024 with the other millages because we don't want to compete with all the other millages, but there might be an opportunity in 24. So that's, in summary, that's what I just want to say that, property tax collections are probably going to only be minor increases, and, we're going to have to constrain our budgets, and it's going to be very difficult without increased revenue looking at the staffing levels. But the most important thing is we just have to make sure the budget is going to be structurally balanced. And once you make those tough decisions up front, it makes it a lot easier 10 years down the road to suddenly find resources to innovate and expand and improve services. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, this is our time to ask any questions. We have 15 minutes. Would anyone like to start us off with some questions?
Well, that's not a good sign.
If I must, I must then. You mentioned a 3-month review of all operations. Tell me about some of the things that you look at in the review. What are you looking for, and how is it going to help us balance it out?
Well, it's not just looking at the types of operations, the scale of services offered, what is the traffic at the counter, or what's the online traffic. It's also looking at decisions that were made in the past. What conversation has Dr. Boggs and his predecessors had? Have they already made some kind of decisions? Have they decided, yes, we're going to maintain these current staffing levels, but when employee A is getting near retirement, we found a way that we think we can adjust without that. I don't want to step on any battles that have already been waged, so I just want to find out what have been the conversations going on in the past. And obviously I'd always be looking at cross-training. I always think it's easier in some positions to have people who are trained in, if we're really providing customer service, it shouldn't be that difficult to have someone who might be able to fill in at the register of deeds, or the clerk, or the treasurer, or the court system in some capacity. When people go on health leave or maternity leave, I look for opportunities like that.
I'm not hogging all the questions here, so I'm waiting for any of you to jump in.
All right, can you speak to the county operating millage?
What page are you on? Last page? Okay.
13.
Yeah. It's not unusual the way your county has done it, where you put it, you pop up the Headley rollback and you let it go for 20 years. In a few counties like Clinton County, we just periodically roll back the Headley. About every 4 to 6 years, we'll have that on there. That way, what I'm trying to say is, let's avoid some sticker shock. You know, if there's an opportunity on the ballot where you're not competing with other more vital services like a senior millage or a healthcare millage, you know, go ahead and put the Headley rollback on there and say, hey, this is, you know, would you rather see the rollback now, or do you want to wait later and suddenly we're seeing $1 million increase in our tax collections, you know, over 15 to 20 years? You know, if you do it periodically every 6 to 8 years, you can avoid that sticker shock, and I think the voters might get into a habit of just go ahead and approving it, saying, this is the funding level we're used
I
to.
think that would be very unlikely. And to speak to that, I would say this is not Clinton County. I really don't think that would fly here.
That is where I would defer to the wisdom of the county board to, you know, take an evaluation of the electorate. I do know, obviously, public safety is a very popular millage. I know yours failed in 2014, which is where you had to make your cuts to road patrol. So definitely it would be a challenging environment. I was just throwing out there as something that the board might consider. If you don't want to do it, if you don't think it's politically feasible, absolutely not.
Thank you.
Other than the obvious ones, meet and greet important stakeholders in Shiawassee County. Who are we talking about? Who do you think would be important in there? I mean, I know there's an obvious set, but
Right. Other than the people in the county, people I'd look for is obviously, you know, who's running the Chamber of Commerce's in the different cities, who's in charge of the, you know, one of the larger nonprofits. I'd look for the Lions Club, the Kiwanis Club, the Rotarians. You know, I'd look and discuss with people who are running, you know, other nonprofits in the area, people involved in the community mental health and the hospital. You look for the large employers, the people with the larger footprints. You talk to the Farm Bureau. You know, you pretty much anyone who has some kind of larger organization that touches some facet of Shiawassee County life, I'd want to interact with right off the bat. So they know that down the line, when we're asking tough questions and making tough decisions, there's a face to the person they can call up and say, hey, why are you guys doing this? Or what are you looking at? And that way, it's not just a cold name on the phone that's talking to them. It's a person they sat down and had a cup of coffee with, and I can explain, this is the challenges we're facing. These are the actions the board is looking at right now.
So kind of more of a community relations type of a function with that sort of thing.
Yeah, like I said, I would start that off right off the way, you know, in the bat, just to introduce myself to the larger community. Because, like I said, even though my family has deep roots, I haven't actually been, you know, located in the county, you know, in my adult life. So I want to make sure I make those introductions.
Anyone else? This is our time.
Well, I would just say that I think that your balanced budget process is very well thought out and nice, but what exactly, where would we get the balanced budget out of this? I mean, are you expecting these stakeholders to like contribute funds, or
No, I'm going to lean heavily on the department heads and the elected officials and tell them these are the fiscal constraints. This is what the revenue is in a range that is available, and we need to find a way to make our budget operations fit. And if that means that, you know, we have to put in a hiring freeze or go to furloughs or God forbid lay someone off, then those are decisions that are going to have to be made. I was told not to get too technical, and I didn't want to get too technical and trying to manipulate the numbers, because quite honestly, you know, the people who've been running these departments over the last 20 years are the ones I'm going to lean on to say, this is what we need to do, and we need to find a way to make it happen.
okay, thank you.
Others? Thank you for your time. Excellent presentation.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
As I was talking to Commissioner Holzhausen before, I've got 2 townships to make my last report to as a county commissioner, so I have to get out of my suit and get my blue jeans, or they're going to laugh me right out of the room before I get down there.
Thank you very much.
But I'm not going to try to shake everybody's hand this time after I knocked over all the microphones last time. So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can we
Thank
take
you.
that screen down? Should we take that down and move it back or something?
I don't know about
The
the next two.
successors may utilize that.
Yes, I think someone asked for it.
Oh, they did?
Thanks, Adam.
They had
Oh,
the
yeah.
option, they had the option to use PowerPoint.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that, I just,
No, I agree, it's kind of distracting.
yeah.
Folks, we're ahead of schedule, we have to do something to, I mean, that's not our reputation, but
He
we're
might
gonna
be-
move right on. Could you please bring in the next candidate? I believe the next candidate will be,
Right.
Ryan.
We're going in the same order. Yes.
How was his last name pronounced?
I think yes.
Rudez?
Yes.
That would probably be a good question.
Let's start with that one, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that Eric, I would use that?
What's that?
Is that how you use it?
I'm gonna ask him.
I think I need to, I don't know, I think
How
you're
to say
right.
his last name?
Yeah, I think so.
I would default to the
Caroline's
owner.
like, what's the matter with you people?
No, I should.
I would default to the owner. Generally.
Could you remind us how to pronounce your last name?
Rudzis.
Rudez.
Rudzis.
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 Yes.
Rud Zis.
R-U-Z-I-S.
I'm sorry, you have to change your name for us. Is that on the table?
I think when my great grandpa came over from Poland, they changed it then.
All right, folks. Let's get started. Just so you know, we have all gotten a summary of the task that's been given to you, so you'll be able to pretty much move right into your presentation as soon as you're ready.
Yeah, watch those chords.
You'll have
Yeah, if you want to hand them to me, I can just
Yeah.
hand them around.
you'll have 15 minutes, and I'll kind of give you a signal as when your time is up. Okay? And then we'll have questions.
Absolutely.
Please go ahead.
Right. What I've handed you is more along the lines of what I consider to be a good process to address this shortfall. 8 categories, and I broke it down into some general ideas of where we could go to bring the budget up to snuff and to make sure it's balanced. So the first thing, and I want to go back to even one of the first questions we had during the first interview about communication with the board. And it is my job to make sure that you're informed that this is a possibility. So you are my first contact before anybody. So after I notified the board here, I'd start meeting with the county finance director as well as the treasurer, 2 people that handle money the most here. And we would just start discussing where we're seeing this, what's the impact of inflation? Is this going to affect services down the road? And what's cash flow like? Is it slowing down? Are we seeing any trends there? Next thing I'd go into is our county processes being followed. Are we following the purchasing policy? Are we following the credit card policy? Are we staying within budget? Are the things that are being purchased earmarked for that fiscal year? Start looking at audits. Are we following auditors' recommendations? Is there any internal controls there that, hey, we should have strengthened this a couple years ago when we had the chance, and now it's a good opportunity to do that? I think that's really important, especially with your auditors. I think sometimes it gets dismissed, and it can be some hard reading, but it's important when they come every year to make sure that when they're presenting their recommendations that they're enacted timely. And so, before we even get to the cut part, because that's the first thing people think, oh, there's a budget shortfall, so they're going to cut. So no, we're going to talk about revenue. It's one of the first things we do. What are we doing to increase revenue, okay? And so we go through some of those things. And once we got through those, we get to the Finance Administration Committee. Here's what we found so far, and we want to work with you on this. Invite the feedback from your board. It's a team effort. I can't do it alone. The finance director can't do it alone, and the rest of the staff can't do it all on their own. And so make sure that the Personnel Finance Committee or Finance Administration Committee is involved in this too from the get-go. And it's probably going to be more than one meeting. So what kind of funding are we looking for? What kind of revenue are we searching for? Internally and at the state level and at the federal level. What are we charging for fees? When was the last time the fee schedule was looked at? You know, let's just say the clerk's office is processing passports, you know, and it's $80. Well, is there a possibility that could be raised up to $100 or something? It's just small examples of things. Are there fee subsidies? Do we charge certain groups to rent a pavilion a lesser rate than a regular taxpayer at a park? Is everyone helping share in the costs of those amenities and assets that we have? Billing and collection. Are we aggressive in billing and collection without being insensitive to the person that could be behind? Same thing with tax collection. Are we aggressive pursuing that? Is there any foreclosed properties that we could sell to get those off our plate to start bringing revenue? Outside contracts. You know, what have you negotiated with your vendors? When was the last time you talked to them about stuff? If there's certain like IT things out there, have we looked at that? If you have 250 county employees and 150 are on the phone plan, when was the last time the phone plan looked at? There's a lot of small wins. You don't just have to go for the big cut or the big revenue immediately. You can start nickel and diming some things and start shoring up this budget and start bringing money in. Maybe you could offer a stipend instead of a county cell phone. Purchasing. Use a lot of this. So, we talk to other local governments who might be wanting to do bulk purchases with us. Do we have storage to store some of that stuff if we have to buy larger quantities in bulk to save money? One of the things we talked about at the last interview is the bonds. The bond rates have been renegotiated. Has that been looked at? Can we get a lower interest rate? Are we making our payments on time? Cash on hand, your fund balance. Are you following your investment policy? We get a better interest rate at a bank on a CD or any other kind of fund that we have it in to help grow that without taking unnecessary risk. The one thing that is just come across the wire from Lansing is PA 1222, 1223 regarding the liquor tax. Shiawassee County is slated to get almost $90,000 next year if the governor signs this legislation to extend the liquor tax. And on top of that, typically in that legislation, 50% had to be allocated to substance abuse programs. And that's going to be less than 40. So that 10% you can actually roll back into your general fund to help close some gaps. Are we being reimbursed for the child care from the court? You're supposed to get 50 cents on the dollar for indirect costs there. Are we evaluating those costs? Same thing with the friend of the court. 66 cents on the dollar for indirect costs. Are we looking at those? Are we checking the overhead? Are we making sure all the paperwork is submitted? And so those are just some things that I had thought about. They're not immediate answers. They may not even be the right answer, but I felt that was some of the best place to start because you've looked internally and then you've looked elsewhere. You know, there could be other operations that you're performing that the state may reimburse you on or may have a grant for to cover. Before you get to the cut part of the budget, if you have to, on number 5 here, I was really intentional with this because it's important that no matter what happens, that you pay your debt, you pay your bonds. Credit ratings can sink way quicker than they can rise. Do not compromise future liability. Pay your bills. Don't default. Don't think, well, if we wait another month, we might have this money come in, and that will not do it. And so that is, I think that's probably the most important thing is making sure that all your debt is paid and that the county credit rating and the ability to borrow is safe. So if we have to cut somewhere, is it in violation of any contracts that we have, union or else? Meet with your department heads. Sit down with them. Work with them to find out where's my needs at this fiscal year. Can I defer some purchases? Can I maybe hold off on hiring somebody? If need be. I'm not sure where the need may be at necessarily, but that's a possibility. But you start working with your department heads, you're going to find it a lot easier to make some decisions, especially when you involve them from the beginning and not wait to tell them at the end, hey, we got to cut $25,000 out of your capital outlay because we're short, or for whatever reason you may have. So what kind of cuts could you look at, possibly? It said your capital outlay list. If the road commission needs to buy 4 trucks, can we maybe get 2 this year? Is there 2 more that could just last us 1 more fiscal year? If some things are leased, can we extend the lease? You know, there's a lot of options there. And even if you like have like a central fleet management schedule, where you can get all the county assets and equipment under one umbrella and do it that way, that's another possibility. Anything that might have long-term infrastructure impacts, like if you know a road is failing, try and get that done. It's going to cost money even more if you just say, well, we can wait maybe 1 or 2 more years. People see it, they drive it, and if it's visible, they're going to get upset, and it may cost you more in engineering, and you may have to do a whole lot more on that road if worse comes to worse. But if you manage it right, you should be able to get some of it done and still shore up this budget. Furlough days, that's worked in some places. Like another short-term solution. Same thing with a possible 4-day work week. Another short-term solution. I'm not a big proponent of that necessarily because we are here for the public. Should be here Monday through Friday and accessible to the taxpayer. Another thing some local governments have done is being able to work remotely. Maybe some jobs can be done at home, let's say on a Wednesday. Is there work that can be performed at home without bringing people in and still being able to serve the taxpayer? Some of that stuff you may be encountering once the courthouse project starts. And overtime, I know this is a big one, especially with law enforcement and some other groups like this winter snow plowing. You could be out there 10, 12 hours depending on how bad the snow is. Do you have limits on your overtime? Are you checking to make sure that departments are not, going over hours for stuff that they could actually take care of the next day? I know with stuff like the sheriff's office, you could get a call at 5 minutes before your shift, and you could be at like a domestic case for a couple hours. And that's stuff that is anticipated. After you've developed your plan, get back with your treasurer and your finance director, review it, and then bring it to your finance administration committee for another review. Go over with the department heads your rough draft budget. Maybe you got something wrong. You want to show that you're being transparent with them. You want to make sure that they understand, hey, this is why we did what we did. And here's how we're going to change it down the road to make sure that we don't have to do this again. The one thing I do with my council, we don't just have a finance and personnel meeting. I typically do around budget time a committee of the whole approach. Even after personnel finance, I bring up a tall whiteboard that is completely covered in my terrible handwriting. So, and we just go through the budget one by one through departments, and then if they're satisfied with that, then we publish our notice, and then we have our budget. Couple things I just noticed, and going over the budget I was given, and this is just me with no notes, just with the naked eye in my experience. I know that next year you can anticipate inflation being about 5%, so I think even with a $12.049 million budget, you could, on your revenue side, you could probably up that a little bit. I think you could actually see that maybe go to maybe 12.2, 12.3 and still be safe and still be conservative with your estimates. When you go through some of the other things, and this is stuff that just stands out to me as an anomaly. Like I said, no notes, no foresight into this. This is just what I see. If you go like to 215, the clerk's office, you look at health insurance. This year it's budgeted just under 100,000. It was adjusted down to 94. So there's already 5,000 saved there. But then you get into next fiscal year, and there's a 33% jump. Well, what happened? I don't know that without digging into it further. But if you've already adjusted down, how all of a sudden did it just go up? Was there new hires? did the premium increase? Even with PA 152, and you're paying it at 80/20 at the max, seeing a 33% increase, it just raises some questions for me. You go to the 301, you go to the sheriff's office since 2020. It's gone from 1 million in salary to almost 2. Now I know it's real hard to find law enforcement help these days. We were just there. We had one position open, we got one applicant. And so I know it's difficult and it's turned, unfortunately, to a polarized position, and it is an honorable profession. But in 2 years, it's gone up almost double. Well, why? You know, these are just questions that I raise. Same thing with, look at the circuit court. Register of deeds, you see health insurance just fluctuate, go up and down, and all of a sudden just another big jump. I mean, that's stuff that typically, in my experience, remains more constant than really noticeable ebb and flows. But like I said, this is just what I've seen in here, and there'll be a test on this on Friday. So I hope you're all ready. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Right on time. Commissioners, is there time for questions? Anybody want to jump in here and get started, or
I have a question.
please?
So if we know we're in a shortfall for 2022, 2023, which was the project, what are your thoughts then about what might be coming in the next 5 to 10 years? Some other things are going to have to be adjusted. And we can look at all these things,
Sure.
and if we fixed all those things, we're still going to have shortfalls in future years. So what is your long-term thinking about budget projections for 5 to 10 years?
In the short term right now, it really depends what 2023 is going to do to the economy. It's not going to be so much like 2008 where it was directly related to housing. It's going to be a lot of other costs. So like paving a road, it's a petroleum-based product. You know, this gas is $3, $4 a gallon. I hope not. I don't think many people enjoy paying that. But it's really going to really determine what happens next year, and whether, with the central bank, and also too, is the national economy going to affect what the state gives us in like revenue sharing for general fund, for roads and stuff. So it really depends on what's going to happen next year. But I would still be budgeting conservative anyway. I'd rather under promise and I'd rather over deliver. I mean, I think that's the best way to look at it. But I cannot say necessarily 10 years down the road, okay, we're going to be in this position. Things pop up. There may not be a recession. We could be like sail right through it. But I think next year's a critical year to determine what the next maybe 5 years looks like. You can't really necessarily say 10 years down the road.
All right. Nobody else wants to jump in.
I just got,
Yeah.
we really don't look after the road commission. They're private entities, so we can kind of get that out. Some commissioners do, but we didn't take over the road commission. So. That's the only thing I guess.
Getting to the tough thing, because that's what it always comes to. We all like as much money as we can pull out of other government units, but sometimes cuts have to be made. Now, talk to me about priority of service. Obviously, not all services the county provides are created equal. Some of them are legally mandated. You must not let them fall. Some of them are really good to have, excellent. Some are actually, you might even consider them optional in the dark days. So tell me about priority of service at a county level.
You have to have the register of deeds. You have to have your tax collection. I mentioned this earlier about like some counties do passports. That's not required. It's not statutory. It's just another service offered. Building permits. There are some people that are contracted with the county to perform, or not maybe necessarily this county, but other counties in Michigan. I was on the west side of the state. We were contracted with the county for building inspection, and they did most of that stuff. That's not always the case. Sometimes the municipality may not be able to, that's contracting, may not be able to completely fund that. And so you may have to get away from that, even though trying to be collaborative is one of the best ways you can do this stuff. The jail, that's another one. Is the staffing level? The staffing level is always low. Can we share with other counties? Can we try to consolidate some of those services? Can we move some inmates to Saginaw or Genesee to relieve some of the staffing pressures and some of the budgetary pressures here? But when it comes to the cut part, you just can't violate any of your constitutional or statutory duties that are required. Do we have to rent pavilions? Maybe it costs too much to maintain. Maybe we should be charging admission for some of the things that happen at the park. It all depends. And like I said, when I went through some of this stuff, you could see where some of the budget's going. A lot of the public safety aspect of it consumes a lot of it. But it's also, you have to have it. You have to have protection for the residents here. You have to have a system that works. Sometimes you may not even have to cut services if you're willing to work with some of even the unions that say, hey, we're paying 7% on our health insurance. Hey, we've been treated well here. Maybe we'll pay now. Maybe you can get to that point without having to cut. Because some residents are so used to certain services, the moment you cut them, and then when you all get the phone call, how come you're not doing this anymore? We used to love coming up and, and like, well, maybe we should reevaluate that. And so before you do any cuts, you have to just make sure that it's not impacting the service that people have been so used to for so long.
Nobody else is gonna jump in, I'll keep going. Haven't been on the commission as long as most of my fellow commissioners, but one thing I have noticed is that when you have meetings with department heads, they advocate for their own department. And if you decide you have to say cut 2 people to balance a budget, somewhere in the county you got to cut 2 people. I don't believe at a meeting you'll find that any of them say, yeah, I got an extra person. Not gonna happen. It'll be more the end of the world if you cut. So how do you figure out who really? I mean, that's a broad question. But you're going to meet with, you want to meet with the department heads. What are you going to ask them? What are you going to find out from them that's going to help you make a decision? I hate to do it, but we got to cut a person here or half a person there or whatever.
Well, you may not necessarily even have to cut. You could, depending on what department it is, hey, I got a couple employees that have been here 27, 20 years, and maybe we can find a way to offer early retirement and still retain some of the people that have been here as long. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but then the flip side of that is, man, I just lost 20 years of that knowledge base. I lost a skilled operator in a machine, and that, and sometimes that may affect services more than I think people realize. Like, got a guy digging around the gas line. Well, hey, this is why I want this piece of equipment because I know it's going to get done right. Sometimes it's based on seniority, and sometimes it all depends what maybe the union contract says. Who's the first person let go? It could be someone that's been here 5 years. Maybe that's the person that's been here the least amount of time. But you also have to ask your department head, what are you prioritizing? What are your goals for next year? Can you do this job without this person? And you're right, they'd probably say, no, I can't. No one wants to be the bad guy and say, got to let him go, but at some point they have to make an administrative decision. And it's your job to help lead them to it. And so if they have to cut somebody, there is a way to do it. But you also don't want to not come and be like, well, now I blew my budget. And now we're a month behind because I decided to retain somebody for an extra 120 hours this month.
One more question. You still have some. Did you have a question? I see you moving your hand.
Well,
please jump in ahead of me. I don't want to hog all the time.
Excuse me. Again, more of an observation. You did an excellent job of the budget presentation, and I think you've shown a real good knowledge of some of the steps that we could take. My question is, that a lot of these steps, as you might imagine, have already been taken or considered, but it still shows that a great thought process. How comfortable are you with the really tough decisions as opposed to some of the ones that may be just a little easier?
I will say, the longer I've done this, when you first start getting into this role, it's really, really hard. And you first want to say, I don't want to die on that hill. And I've been there. But the longer, if you're not going to take hold of those decisions, it's going to impact service. It really is. And it's going to impact how your department heads and how your board sees you. I feel I've gotten a whole lot better at that. And it's taken time. It didn't happen yesterday. It didn't happen last week. It's taken 8 years. I'm still growing. I'm still learning. And if I'm not, then I am the perfect administrator. If I hit every mark, and I'm not that person, but I'm a person that's still going to learn as I'm going. I could do this 30 years. If I'm not learning something, or if I'm not willing to do better, even at 55, 60 years old, I'm shorting myself and I'm shorting the people at home.
Thank you.
And another question as we're looking at difficult decisions made and what can I see? Of course, you included the board's formal responsibility to, at the end, come and approve the budget and so on. But again, my limited experience, I found the board's experience to sometimes be very deep, a lot of knowledge, a lot of institutional knowledge, but also a lot of good insights on kind of, I don't exactly say where skeletons are buried, but you know what I'm talking about. Perhaps some of the more subtle things going on in the county. Sometimes biases that are perhaps unfair. Sometimes they are very fair. What's the board's function, I would say, less formally in their relationship with you in doing the budgeting and perhaps even on a day-to-day basis?
I still hope they talk to me, at least on a weekly basis. I hope they're available to talk because each one of you represents a different part of the county. And different parts of the county are going to have different needs. It's not all the same. And so there still has to be open communication. We still have to be able to talk. Budget's one of the biggest things, if not the biggest thing that we do. And at least I know where I'm at. It's my biggest project of the year. And I know I can't always get the engagement I want out of some boards with it, but showing up to a meeting and participating, that's a big step for me to see, like, hey, they're here, they may not say much, but at least I can say, I've told them, they've been informed, and they know where I'm leaning in a decision, and I hope they trust me with that decision. But I also hope to gain wisdom from people that say, like, hey, well, why have you considered this? I think it's important to still be a team effort regardless.
Thank you. Anything else? I guess then we're all set. Thank you for your time. I think you did an excellent job. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Have a good evening.
You do that.
Yes.
You want Morgan, please?
How's everyone doing tonight?
Well, Kyle, thank you for coming here today.
It's quite a bottle of water.
Thank you for having me come back.
Just to let you know, we've been briefed on what your task is,
Okay.
what you've been given, so you don't need to summarize that for us. You can just jump into your presentation. You'll have 15 minutes. 15 minutes. And,
Sure.
with up to 15 minutes of questions afterward.
Okay.
So you can get started anytime you'd like.
Yep. No, I don't mind.
Yeah, we'll just hand that out and then we'll let you get started so we're not distracted.
Okay. No,
As soon
and
as we get that handed out.
I apologize in advance. Some of your eyes have a little more miles on them than mine. You may not be able to read this, so. but they're there if you can. So.
Why was he looking at me when he said that?
Because you were looking for your glasses.
I was looking for mine.
I see some of the staples, how many pages?
One page for most. I think the last couple were a couple pages. So.
Some of them didn't print on both sides.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I see.
That was outsourcing that to my wife to accomplish that role. So.
Greg, did you need to hear? Oh, that's extra.
Okay then. If we're good, or do we need to wait for Frank?
No, go ahead.
Okay, well again, thank you for having me back here tonight. I really appreciate it. So, looking at the budget, obviously, the prompt was to discuss the $1.7 million deficit for the year 23. And really, it's going to break down, in my opinion, in two things. Your revenues went down, your expenses went up. I mean, that's really going to be the bottom of it, and how do we address those? So even just looking at some of your 2023 through 2021 numbers, you had a shortfall of, I don't say shortfall, but a difference of just over $1 million. In 2021, you had revenue exceeding just over $20 million. This year, at least in the document that I had, projecting at $18.9 million for 23, while your expenses between 22 and 23 were a difference of $877,000. So your expenses went up, revenues went down. So before I really want to get into where we're going to tackle this problem, I think it's worth taking a step back and addressing the process to be taken first. So, Tracy? Okay, I hear she'd be my new best friend as your resident budget expert here. So I think really when looking at how to go ahead addressing any budget, it would be sitting down with her first, getting really that in-depth knowledge of where everything's at all across the board. And really kind of we want to learn kind of the who, what, where, when, and why of the budget. I think to go forward and try to really get anything out is a little bit premature if you don't have the good groundworks covered. Then it's a matter of sitting down with the elected officials and department heads, asking them what they need. What's their interpretation of their department budgets? Where do they see that maybe they have a little too much? If they tell you they have too much, I would be shocked, because there's never too much. If they tell you there's too little, which is probably going to be the case. I know in my experience the court's always the first one in line saying it's too little. But again, I think it warrants having those conversations with the elected officials, department heads. I know last week when I was here, I told you that my goal in the first 12 months was just try to be building relationships, open communications. Well, I think that's going to start here. You come in and start saying you're going to start cutting, raising fees, this, that, without any input. That takes the whole building relationships and throws it right out the window. So again, I think laying a good foundation is key to starting with building a good budget. As well as then after that, bring that matter back to the board. And Mr. Chairman, as you see my asterisk down here, you're going to be kept in the loop at all times. I think that's warranted as well, to keep note that this just isn't an administrator going off, doing things without you knowing. You need to be kept in the loop, but I think there's kind of a time and a place. And then obviously it's really as far as you let me go. In my experience with Saginaw County, board chair, hey, if you want the administrator to go down something, look at that rabbit hole, they will. If you don't, okay, well then that's it. So really I think a lot of this, I think as we're saying, kind of comes at the blessing of the board. So again, I just want to kind of get that out of the way first, because like I said, I really do believe that a good budget, really relies on having a good process in place first before we can go further. So looking at increasing revenues, I really think when sitting down, looking at your budget, it's going to come down to we're analyzing our county departments, the agencies, and see where do we need to raise fees if that should be the case. Are some of them antiquated? Some of them outlive their usefulness? Can we adjust some? Courts, for instance, I know during COVID, with some of them not necessarily taking cases, depending on what level of court it was and what the issue may have been. Maybe they weren't bringing in some of those revenues that they should have. Maybe they were forgiving some, just everybody was having some issues during COVID with personal finance, so there was some leniency. So really analyzing where those shortfalls are coming and how we can shore them up, and do we need to beef them up in any way, shape, or form. And then again, like I said, just looking at, is there outdated fee structures? Do they need to be changed? Something of that nature. So that's kind of like looking at the in-house side of things. But then I think, too, we also need to look at economic development. Obviously, we can say we're going to have this great economy or great, county and budget and all that, but if you don't have the business here to bring in those tax revenues, you don't have the residents here, the rest of this doesn't mean much of anything. So, working with economic development, Justin Horvath with the Shiawassee County Economic Development Partnership. I think that is going to be crucial. I know in my experience, Saginaw County, always working with Saginaw Future, which is kind of our economic development arm, seeing where we can bring things in. They have their partnerships throughout multiple counties, so that's a good relationship to have. And I think you also need to look at, is Shiawassee County a friendly environment to do business in, invest in? If not, what do we need to do to get there? If I recall back a few years ago, there was an article in the paper, company, I think they wanted to build floating docks or something like that. Wanted to come in somewhere off 69. And the local township threw a fit, didn't want them in here. And I don't know whatever came of it, but I grabbed that article and I sent it to our economic development corporation and said, hey, if that county doesn't want business, we'll take it. How can we reach out and bring them up into Saginaw? And that was the last I've ever heard of that. But, what's that?
That's because we got it.
Good. Well, good for you. But I guess it brings the question is why was there any hesitation to bring in business? I don't think we can say by any means that our economy is just booming. I don't think we can be turning down business. And then again, just looking at land use. Are we doing what we can for land use? I know, especially if you get over to your northeast side of the county, solar farms is kind of a hot topic, but it can bring revenue. If done right, I will put that caveat. And there's some work with planning commissions. Again, how can you ease the concerns of your constituents? I hear that, your solar field is the one that I always hear is a great example of why solar is the worst thing to come. I'm not going to take a stance on that particular project, but I'll tell you, I know 5 other solar projects I can go past, even some in Saginaw, and you don't see them. They don't seem to be that big of an issue. I think it's just a matter of your setbacks and any kind of regulations like that can help address some of those. So I really think, under the economic development, looking at these various factors to make sure that Shiawassee County is going to be a breeding ground for new business, investment, innovation. So looking at cutting expenses. Analyzing departments to see where increased efficiencies can come from. Is it just a matter of workflow? If we can, shift the process of doing things, can we increase the efficiency a little more? And I would like to think that your efficiencies translate into dollars and cents. Now, will you be saving $1.7 million by increasing a little efficiency? Probably not. I always like to think of it, even if it's $5,000. $5,000 is still public money, and that's a step in the right direction. That can go to something else. As well as staffing. If you're looking, and you guys are looking at your employee compensation, I was always under the mindset by looking at your compensations, job descriptions like that, can also help point to maybe where you're a little heavy in some regions versus others. And then can you shift employees potentially to other areas where your uses might be a better fit, or you're not, you're getting more bang for your buck, I think would be the best way to describe it. So, and I think if you can adjust that, you can address the idea of your budget, I don't want to say budget shortfalls, but your deficits without actually going through making cuts. If you can just try to rework and better utilize where the funds are going. And then I think you have shopping around for your employee benefits and retiree benefits. So as you guys dealt with yourself in the last couple of years, you realize your employee health care was quite high and going higher. So once you made that switch, 44 North, saving about $800,000 a year. Excuse me, I'm trying to get over a cold, so I think, it warrants looking at your different vendors somewhat frequently to see, can you get a better deal? What's changed between now and then? Saginaw County here, we redid our retiree health care a couple of years ago and brought down, it was going to be $150 million, and we brought it down to less than $100 million. It took a while. There were some tears, unfortunately, but our retiree healthcare has understood that if we didn't help address the issue now, eventually there might be nothing. And it brought down a fairly substantial chunk of that bill. So I think, again, looking at where we can make some changes. And I took this out of your 2019 budget message. While this will, and then this is regarding an accounting program software, I believe it was. But while this will involve the initial expense you absorbed in the 2019 budget, the transition is expected to pay substantial future dividends through lower maintenance costs, better service, and more integration efficiency for the entire county's budgeting and accounting functions. I love when we can look at innovative things, bring in. It sounds like it's something you needed.
I think that's our transition to BSNA.
Okay. So if you need the new software and you can bring in software that's actually more efficient and can save money, well, that's just great. Doing the same thing back home right now in Saginaw County with redoing heating. It's going to cost us about $9 million to redo the heating in our courthouse. And that's patchwork. Or $10 million, we get a whole new heating system, but now we can shut it down when we don't need it, certain zones, and we would be using only a fraction of gas. I think right now you need it at something like, I don't know, not a 400 PSI or whatever for your water pressure to go through, but in the summertime, you might only need 5 PSI or something of that nature. Because when we built our new jail, the new jail went on a new system and we didn't need all the extra infrastructure that's now 50 some years old. So by investing something like a few $100,000 more to put a new system in is going to save us more down the road. So looking at different innovative practices like that, I think is very worthwhile. Can you get them all today? No, you're probably not going to, but I think it's one of those, as you go through to update certain infrastructures here and there, I think you can then plug those in, because that could be a monumental bill in itself, trying to just tackle everything at once. So looking at other opportunities here. Incentives for other than cash for employees. If we're even looking at, want to tackle employee morale. Sometimes the dollar seems to be what helps them make their day go by a little bit better. Something we're trying in our clerk's office now is, hey, if you want to come in at 6, great, now you can leave at 2. If you want to come in at 8 and then leave at 4, that works too. Or maybe you want to come in at 10 in the morning and then you leave at 6 in the afternoon. Now, they can't all do it at the same time, but the way the clerk's office has got it broken out is with a 2 weeks heads up, you can change your schedule, but you don't always have to be there from that 8 to 4, 8 to 4:30. I think it's, is it new and innovative? Probably not. Other people, I'm certain, are doing it somewhere. Something we're looking at, first time within Saginaw County. And so far the feedback is great, that personnel are actually enjoying it. Those who work a little better early in the morning can come in and get their workload done. Those who, yes sir.
We're at our 15, but I don't want to cut you.
And that is good because that is my last slide.
Oh.
But at least those gave you some ideas of just looking at possible
Excuse
other...
me for interrupting then.
No, I appreciate it.
If nobody objects, I'll jump right in. We're going to have questions for you now.
Sure thing.
And thank you for the presentation. It was very good. But I got to say, there's an old saying, there's more than one way to skin a cat, but there's no way to do it where the cat's going to like it. I think you kind of left out the pain. All of this is fine, but you still have $500,000, got $100,000, whatever. How are you going to handle painful parts? That is, you're going to have to. How are you going to figure out who to cut? Do we have to cut two people, 3 people? You decide. Whatever it is. How are you going to do that?
That is a great question, and I think that's where it comes back to the conversation with the department heads as to what do you really need and what can you get by with. And at the end of the day, it's just going to have to come, from wherever. I mean, I don't want to jump on, I think right now, for me, it's a little bit premature to say, I'm going to pull it up at clerk's office. But I think, having those conversations internally will lead you down that.
Sorry, our clerk, I was just making.
I just got my full stack.
Would you like to borrow my gavel?
No, you're right. It's going to be painful. It's not going to be easy. I don't think it's going to be done in a year. Realistically, you're going to have to make some tough choices, and it's going to take a couple, 3, 4 years, whatever, depending on how things get bad. I mean, the economy could take a tank January 1, and, 1.7 might not be the problem then. So, you're right, it's going to be painful. I think it's just trying to sit down and make the best decision with the information you have at hand at the time decisions are being made.
Commissioners, further questions?
This is a random question.
County Attorney? Eric?
I remember a lot of discussion with the jail in Saginaw because you brought it up that there would be a lot of that would be paid for by efficiency and staffing gains from increased technology, and the sheriff's department would need to spend less money to run the same amount of incarceration. Has that been working out in your experience yet?
For the most part, yes. So you are correct. The sheriff came to us and said that he could pay for his new jail by cutting 20-some employees. A lot of that would come through efficiencies. So with the new pod system, centrally located, if you understand jails, you might be able to understand that a little bit better, but that would require less personnel. As well as some of them we just got rid of through attrition, whether they left from the jail and went over to road patrol, things of that nature. So we didn't necessarily terminate 20-some employees, but we were able to reduce that number. And granted, the sheriff would come back to us every so often and say, by the way, I overestimated 20-something a little much. We need this person back, or we need that person back. But overall, no, it has worked out. We have brought down that personnel substantially, and it's been doing fine, making the payments, set aside any hiccups in the construction that would jack up costs here or there, but we took care of those. But no, overall, more efficiency helped us bring down, like I said, that number of 20-some employees, and it's covering the bills.
Okay, I'll jump in with another one. I appreciate you mentioning when you get to know people and have meetings and so on, that you mentioned your board. Our feelings get hurt easily. Tell me something about how you, the relationship with the board, how would you deal with both perhaps what you might call overzealous board members or completely disengaged board members? Go to both ends of the spectrum. And no fellow board members, I'm not talking about anyone in particular
I really feel
on
targeted.
this board.
I know you're not talking about me.
Remember the last time I gave everybody a compliment how much knowledge there was here?
No, I think that's great. I think from an administrator, coordinator position, it's take it with a grain of salt, take it day by day. If you have someone who's overzealous, I've seen it, not necessarily at my county, but from other counties. And I think you do what you can to address that individual and their concerns without going over the top. I think to some degree it may involve the chair setting that individual down. But then the other way around, for someone who's, I don't want to say disenfranchised, but just not engaged, I don't really know what you can do from an administrator. You can try to answer their questions, see what's got them not in tune. Saying you can bring a horse to water, you can't make him drink. So for that individual, I don't really know what more you can do other than, at the end of the day, hope his voters or her voters address that problem.
I'm impressed you took my lead and came up with another cliche for me. That was good. Board member, other questions for this candidate? Anything?
I think he's got all my questions answered.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And I'm not keeping here nearly as long as I did last time. Okay.
Now here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking of asking for a motion from one of my board members to offer to one of the candidates. That would open up discussion on all of the candidates.
Yep, traditionally that you would have a motion, that would be a vehicle for debate upon that motion.
And then whoever is selected by that motion, they may not necessarily, if that person, if it's a no vote, then we would perhaps have another motion.
You'd have to have another motion.
A different candidate. But to open up discussion, we'll have a motion for one of the candidates.
I would be happy to make a motion to offer the position to Kyle Harris, the gentleman that just
I think
presented.
the motion needs to be to,
There is a floating around a template.
Do you want me to?
It has to be a template?
It doesn't have to be anything, but it is helpful, is it not?
to enter into negotiations or to offer.
Right.
We just want to do it.
Sure. Do you want this?
You want to make the motion?
I guess.
I appreciate it.
I move to make a conditional offer of employment as Shiawassee County Coordinator to Kyle Harris contingent upon successful contract negotiations and background check.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a second. Now we can enter into discussion. Thoughts, everybody?
Well, I would say that none of the candidates really struck me as ruthless as Dr. Boggs. When we talk about...
That was a compliment.
It was.
You have no ruth whatsoever.
Well, we have, to each of our candidates, we talked to them about tough decisions. I think they were all very knowledgeable, but they were all pretty upbeat and rosy, and that's not, we need somebody tough.
And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No.
I'm tending to agree with you to some extent. It's interesting, the candidate that you chose to nominate, because of the three candidates, I think that one provided the least information on the difficult decisions. All of them, I thought, and I understand the position, they don't want to come in doom and gloom, even though this was a very doom and gloom scenario, because it's reality. I would have said that of the three, that was the candidate that gave us the least information. That's why I sort of had to pull it out at the end.
But that was the thing, because I think the
Yeah.
other candidates gave us information that we already had. We already did. It was too easy.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying that guy really blew me away either, but
I didn't find the question really answered. And again,
By any of them.
all three did a pretty good job, but yeah, again, like last time. Good to that. Marlene, please.
I felt like Adams did the best job of talking about making tough cuts. I felt like he was aware of that and brought that up on his own and referenced that. And I felt like he may have the experience of actually doing that to get that work done. And what I felt like from him was that we got sort of a big picture, and from Kyle too to some extent, but I felt like Adam really kind of understands the role as a big picture within the county of the sort of public relations piece of it, although that's not all of it, and also gave a really good understanding of all of the dynamics economically that are going to impact our budget for the next 5 to 10 years, and talked about doing like a 10-year capital improvements thing, which we have talked about doing before. It has kind of bitten us over and over again. These projects continue to emerge, and we have to figure out a way to fund them instead of having sort of a plan for how to address those. And Dr. Boggs has done a lot of work, and I know we've talked about, so it's not a criticism of him, it's just something we've said that we haven't got to. But I felt like Adam had the most experience and the toughest response of all when it came to what do we have to do when we do cuts. He included that in his presentation without being prompted.
It seems like it was more a matter of fact with him.
Yes, it just has to happen.
Less emotion, more this is just a fact of how it is.
Commissioner Holzhausen?
I guess everybody, I like Ryan better. He's the only one that's actually managed people. The other ones just talked about it, so. They did a lot of talking. They did, I mean, they said what we're going to do, what we're going to cut, but he was actually the one that physically managed people and cut people and did what he's supposed to do. You know, I'm old-fashioned, more low-key, so that's the reason I picked I'd be more in favor of him. So he's more he's actually done. The other ones just talked about it, but they haven't never done it. So
Adam was definitely strikes me as the better statistician. But I have concern that almost too much statistician and not enough of all of the other skills that are needed. I might be wrong. It's so hard in such a short interview. The Adam and Kyle's background are both, of course, as in effect legislative aides, legislative researchers and so on. As Gary says, not managing people. To me, that's a big plus for Ryan. Ryan is the least probably smooth of the three in my opinion.
oh yeah.
But I don't think that's particularly important in this job. I sort of wish he managed a bigger city, but he has managed a city. So to me, that's kind of a big thing. And he did pretty much answer the questions I put to him. I wasn't real satisfied with the answer that Kyle gave, even though I kind of teed it up for him. I don't get a feeling with Kyle a confidence of experience, and that one bothers me. That this just might be, he might not be ready for the major leagues yet. Again, these are just subjective things. Huh?
Yeah, my opinion, I felt Kyle has not had enough experience in the hiring and the give and take of a large budget that he's in charge of through the Board of Commissioners. I did feel that Adam, of the three, maybe Adam and Stacy, gave the best second interview because he was a statistician. He brought in a graph and everything. And again, our second is Ryan. I know Randy, it's Ryan. And he has experience in working with people, having to maybe have to move somebody out and let them go, and then rehire somebody. That is, when you have to do that, first few times it's quite difficult. After a while, you have a goals and you have budgets, and you have to have individuals that can perform those realms. If we take a little bit of a bigger picture here, we didn't really have a finalist for this county administrator job that had been an assistant county administrator, or maybe a finance director of a county, or any of those activities. I think when you step up from cities and villages and townships, we have other elected officials that are 4-year term, and they have statutory obligations, and you always have to balance that. And also we have the judiciary. And with that, all three candidates have never been in those realms on a continuous basis. And a lot of times they run quite well. You can get through a year if you have enough money in your budget. Everything does work. But sometimes when you have to say to the three branches that you're not going to have as much money, you can have shouting matches and all sorts of things. So who can better handle those pressures? Who can better handle, because that person, that individual that we pick or hire is going to work with everyone in trying to figure out how to manage down a budget. And then if we have deflation, which we've never had really in my lifetime, that could really set off a real round of problems, especially where your bennies are concerned. I just think that whoever we put in this position is going to have challenges, and who can best handle those challenges with the set of skills that each one of these people have. I would tend to say that I kind of agree with Gary a little bit. The second gentleman, Ryan, he's had to do those things, but I also know that the first gentleman, he knows the ins and outs. He knows how to do those things. I think, and I personally feel that Kyle is a little bit inexperienced. I would say that he needs more seasoning. But I like all three of them. I certainly liked all four of the people we interviewed, and I like these three too.
Commissioner Howard, you've been quite silent. Marlene has her hand up.
No, you go.
Okay.
No.
I was going to say that I kind of echo what my fellow commissioners had said. I think the first candidate, Adam Stacy, clearly brought the most financial statistician analysis to this presentation today. He brought a projection of the forecast, which I liked, beyond just this year, to say, okay, what's going to happen in 23, and then 24, and 25, and 26, and so on. I thought that was very useful, and that when you do a budget, it's going to impact next year. Just like when we do this budget, we need to be thinking about what's going to happen when we're doing it again in December of 23. So I like that. I like that Ryan had managerial experience. I don't think he was as strong on the financial side, though. But he had, so they are almost opposite of each other. And then I like that Kyle had he had real spunk and real energy, which I didn't see necessarily as much from the other two. He had drive. He had lots of names of people in the county who he would talk to, which he obviously reached out and found their names. I mean, that takes some willingness to learn and to grow, and he's already done that and doesn't even have the job. So I think you can learn experience, you can get that experience, but you have to have the drive. And if you don't have the drive, are you going to get the experience? Maybe, maybe not. Will the experience carry you over the benefit of the drive? I don't know. That's why we're here.
Good insights, Brad. That's
Commissioner
tough.
Webster. Oh, I'm sorry.
Really tough.
Commissioner Webster.
I liked, I felt like Adam in his presentation was aware of a lot of the things that we've done. And I didn't get that feeling, especially from Ryan. A lot of the things he listed as potential things to do were things we've done, and he hadn't done enough research to find out that we've already done that. Kyle knew some of the things, but I felt like there was quite a bit in Adam's presentation of an awareness of the dynamic of kind of where we are in Shiawassee County. He had his whole sheet about the sort of long-term wins and our employer-based challenges, population challenges, all of those things that he included. I had a sense that he had done some research on our county.
Well, this is interesting. It certainly is an echo of our last meeting, isn't it?
It's called vote on Kyle.
Well, I'm gonna have to, I'm just making sure no one else, I don't rush anything. All right, hearing no more discussion. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Board Chair, would a straw be better?
I don't
at
know,
first?
can I do that?
Because I'd hate to vote
I
no
s-
on a candidate if they're my second place and all of a sudden we end up with, you know what I mean?
You know, yeah, that's not a bad.
I don't wanna do that.
It's certainly fine to do informal things like that, as long as at the end of the day you come back and have a resolution.
Definitive.
Sure.
Absolutely.
All right,
Do
let's
you want
do.
me to rescind my motion?
No, like I did last time.
Yeah, like last time.
All right, hold on a minute then, okay?
I guess I don't know
Maybe
what he's doing.
If
we're
I
gonna
may
do a straw
ask
poll.
each of you,
Kind
A 1,
of.
2, 3.
I'm gonna do a little tally here. If I may ask each of you who would be your number 1 and your number 2 choice, that maybe that'll give us some idea which way we're trending. Is everybody okay with that?
What if may I make a suggestion, Chair?
Certainly.
What if we just say yes or no to each candidate and not rank them? Because we ranked them last time and we almost ended up in a dead heat.
Well, because I think what Commissioner Garber said is, and then if we end up with our number 2, we voted no on them, and that's not a good way to get started in
Yeah,
a relationship.
that's what I'm afraid.
But that's I was just going to, would you hire that person, yes or no?
So we
But
can
it
vote
might
yes
be
on
yes.
two.
You could vote yes on all 3. Or,
Okay.
I'm just trying, because last time we ended up in a dead heat with
I
the
think
ranked
I'd
choice
have
voting.
to-
Yeah.
Eric's.
We
No,
I-
Yes.
Just looking at it from,
Yeah.
you need to do the top 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
We
Because
have another commissioner
you're-
this time.
Correct, and only top 2.
Okay.
Now,
Yes.
the third one's gotta drop off.
Okay. That's fine.
Once we know that,
Then you can either withdraw this motion, or go ahead with this
then we
motion.
can tally that.
Yeah.
All right. So, Commissioner Webster, would you like to,
My top 2.
your top, who's number 1 and who would be number 2, your number 2?
My number 1 would be Adam, and my number 2 would be Kyle.
Okay. Commissioner Marks,
That's exactly me. Adam 1, Kyle 2.
Commissioner Plowman,
I'll mix it up here and I'll do Ryan 1 and Adam 2.
Commissioner Garber,
Kyle 1, Ryan 2.
Commissioner Howard,
Kyle 1, Adam 2.
oh my goodness. Commissioner Holzhausen,
I'd probably go with Ryan 1 and Adam 2.
Adam 2. And I would have put Ryan as my number 1 choice, and probably Adam as my number 2 choice. So here's the interesting thing. In number 1, we have Adam with 2, but 4 of us finding him as our number 2 choice. Ryan has 3 for number 1, which is the most there, but only 1 for number 2, and Kyle has 2 and 2. So,
You may want to start voting on motions.
yeah, and we might have to vote on the same candidates more than once.
You may.
Isn't Kyle eliminated?
Mm-mm.
No, I don't think that necessarily eliminated anyone.
It's just nothing real.
It's like 33, 33, 33. If you did.
Let's vote on the motion that's on the floor.
That'll be fine. Madam Clerk, would you do a roll call,
Okay, so
please?
this is for offering Kyle.
Offering Kyle, and
This
we'll
is
be
our
looking
number
for a yes or a no on that.
All right. Commissioner Holzhausen,
No.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Garber,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Plowman,
No.
Commissioner Webster,
No.
Chairman Broder.
No.
That's close.
Close. Well, that was 4-3, wasn't it?
Correct.
All right.
Can I have the paper so I can properly read the motion?
Oh, sure.
Certainly.
Okay.
Please feel free.
Thank you. I move to make a conditional offer of employment as Shiawassee County Coordinator to Adam Stacy contingent upon successful contract negotiations and background check.
Second.
I got a motion with the support. I don't know if we need any more discussion on that. No? Then this would be it for Adam Stacy. A roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Garber,
No.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Plowman,
Yes.
Commissioner Webster,
Yes.
Commissioner Holzhausen,
No.
Commissioner Broder,
Then
I mean
yes.
Chairman Broder, sorry.
Then yes.
5-2.
All right then. So Adam Stacy will be offered the position of county coordinator. What now?
We adjourn.
No, well, there is one other thing on the agenda.
Public comment.
I just wanted to make sure there was nothing else we had to do, no further motions.
Thank you, Rick.
No, so Dr. Boggs, I don't know if you had an idea on what we'll do next.
So the next step would be Frank will call them and let the candidates know where they stand. And then he will connect Frank, Eric, and myself together to begin contract negotiations.
Very good. All right, with that, there will be.
How many people, nobody else in
Sorry?
negotiations, we can't be there either, another commission?
Well, we say quote unquote negotiations, but I don't know if it'll be, not like we're all gonna sit down at a table and have, I mean, we're probably gonna say, what's your number? And then we'll offer them an employment contract.
And the contract comes back to you guys to vote on.
Right, you'll get the final for
And
approval.
we set parameters, didn't we, on a salary at a previous meeting?
So there you go.
Oh, you said all the details, how long you can be here and when you can fire and all that kind of stuff then?
As much as we can, I think it'll be similar. I think we'll probably use Dr. Boggs' current contract as a starting point at least with some changes.
Oh, okay.
All right, at this time, we're open to public comment. Is there anybody, I don't have any papers here, but Tom?
One public comment I've got is this, and I don't know what you all think about this, but do you think it's necessary for the person who has this job to live in the county? I didn't hear any of you discuss that tonight, but I don't think we've ever had a person in this position that didn't live in our county. And I didn't hear any of you even discuss whether that was important or not. So I'm just asking, that's just something I'm throwing out there. Is that something that you want to see, that the person who runs this county actually lives here?
Ryan said he was gonna move here.
I think residency requirements are not legal, are they?
I'm not taking any position on that, and I would also say that topic was, go back, I would recommend maybe you go back and look at the first set of interviews. I think it was discussed with each of them.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? In that case,
Rejected.